Great. We do get people watching them afterwards. It is a real resource. So yeah, thank you in advance for the session because it just adds to the kind of insight that people can get into how all these things work. That's definitely a big plus. So I think you've probably all seen the program. Gemma's going to start us off.
Brilliant. Oh, well, welcome everybody. You're all coming into the session now, and a couple of people might be joining us over the next few seconds. But thank you for coming to this session. This is the Designing a Course or Educational Programme, our June Masterclass. This is a series of masterclasses running throughout the year designed to support our members who make a livelihood from permaculture. So our project leaders, our teachers, designers, businesses and consultants. So this masterclass, it runs as a panel with a series of key questions answered by our experts, with Andy Goldring, our CEO, interviewing our panel today. Please use the chat to suggest any other questions, which we'll try and put to the panelist if time allows. And please keep yourself on mute throughout, if you don't mind, as this is being recorded. Thank you. Over to Andy.
Great. Thank you, Gemma. So, and I should say thanks to Gemma in lots of different ways because Gemma does a fantastic job as our education lead. And if you're interested in any of the education work that we're doing, then Gemma's always really keen to talk to people about, your work as a teacher or as a prospective teacher, whether that's in mainstream education or in, adult education. So, yeah, making lots of great advances around sustainability leads in schools and our online learning platforms. So, yeah, if you've got any questions about the work we do as an education charity, please do get in touch with Gemma. So I'm just going to introduce myself briefly, and then I'm going to introduce the panel. So, my name's Andy Goldring, and I'm Chief Executive of the Permaculture Association. And I first started working with the Permaculture Association as a volunteer in the sort of mid-90s around education. It's something that I feel really passionate about. For me, sustainability is a massive learning challenge. How do we learn to be more regenerative, more sustainable, to live more lightly on the earth? That to me is a learning and education challenge. So yeah, I was very drawn to permaculture education right from the very beginning. And I've had lots of different experiences around that. And one of the big ones for me was co-editing the Permaculture Teacher's Guide with Patrick Whitefield, which put me in touch with 30 plus different educators that were mostly in the UK. And yeah, just developing a guide, but really more than that, developing an understanding of how permaculture could be used in so many different contexts. Then I've worked with other teachers in Europe around the Permaculture Educator course, and I run an annual course in Leeds. So today really is very close to my heart. It's a subject I'm very passionate about, and I know that I'm going to learn a lot from these three really fantastic panelists, all of whom I have absolutely, a lot of respect for. So to introduce our panelists, we're joined by Laura Corfield, who is the co-founder of Shift Bristol and curator of Shift Bristol's Practical Sustainability course. Laura ensures that the education they provide is accountable to their aims, engages students, ensures that the course is experienced as safe, accessible and illuminating, and that the course content is relevant to the challenges we face as humans and as a community. And yeah, Laura brings so much sort of depth to her teaching and her facilitation, and is also a real kind of change maker more widely in Bristol and beyond. We're also joined by Alfred who is a permaculture educator and activist, and he's co-developed the online version of Rosemary Morrow's permaculture teacher training, which was an awesome achievement, such a big task to make such a kind of interactive and creative course available and successful online, which I think Alfred's done very successfully. Alfred has also co-edited 3 versions of the training manual, and facilitated 20 different rounds of teacher training, which is a very impressive achievement. His current passion and focus is how permaculture can be used for and with refugees and migrants, how permaculture education can be designed for them as learners, and how they in turn can best share their valuable knowledge and experience with others. So a real focus around refugees and migrants and making that link with permaculture and how that can be a way of enabling and empowering and supporting them to be successful and work through the many, many challenges that they have, often imposed from outside. And finally, we're joined by Aranya, who completed his diploma in applied permaculture design in 2003 and started teaching the following year. Since 2004, he has taught well over 100 two-week design courses. I think there is no one else, possibly, certainly in the UK, that's done more permaculture design courses than Aranya. And it says here that he has no intention of stopping. Fantastic. So, I'm looking forward to the Aranya AI PDC teacher, 2021-30. It's going to exist. So he feels that it's a privilege to have the opportunity to teach something that can make a real difference to all of our lives. In the spring of 2012, Permanent Publication published his first book, Permaculture Design, a step-by-step guide, which is really an invaluable teaching resource. I promote it as one of our core texts on the Leeds Permaculture Design course. That book evolved from a set of design course worksheets and, I think is core to the work that you do, Aranya, on your sessions. So, that's a fantastic resource for everyone. Aranya is currently writing a second book about a subject he's especially fascinated by, which is the application of systems thinking and patterns in permaculture design, which is a long-awaited text. We're very much looking forward to reading that. Okay, I guess briefly all I can say is what an amazing group of panelists. We've got 3 people with a really diverse experience, a lot of expertise, but also 3 very different sets of experience and expertise. So, yeah, we're going to have a good discussion here. And I think the thing to remind people is if you have any questions, then please add them into the chat and we will try to cover them over the next hour or so. So I think what I'd like to do really is to start with a go-around for each of the panelists, just on the broad theme of this masterclass, and then we'll get into some more specific questions. So could you tell me a bit more about your experience of designing an educational program, and maybe more specifically, a permaculture educational program? So let's start with that, Aranya, then go to Laura, and then we'll hear from Alfred. And don't feel rushed here, 4, 5, 6 minutes, whatever you need to just start us off with your own kind of experience of designing permaculture educational programs. So, Aranya, how is it for you?
Thank you, Andy. Yes, well, I suppose for me, one of the key design approaches is incremental design. So in terms of teaching the PDC, which I've done the most often, I inherited an amazing set of handouts. As you talked about the teacher's guide before, which was coming out as I was starting to teach, having done my PDC in '96 and sort of didn't really have an idea about what I was doing at that point. So then getting to the point of, okay, so I'm inspired by this, how do I teach it? And having the opportunity to shadow other teachers as part of, well, what ended up becoming Design Visions for a while. So that was really, I mean, for me, collaboration, learning from others, inheriting this amazing set of handouts, which had been created by lots of other teachers that had been accumulated over the years, and getting to learn from other people, how they teach particular things. And the teacher's guide was invaluable there. So yes, I think in terms of, for me, the PDC has just come from a process of working with other people, learning, gradually bringing other people in, they're coming and going, developing my own ideas, putting things together. So, and then because wanting to teach, I ended up having to convene my own courses as well, which was also very interesting and useful because I learned a lot from that. So, and then of course we all got inspired with new ideas and new things, and so I've been involved in or developed ideas around livelihoods, but always putting the ideas I have about how to put those together. So thinking about the design process in terms of applying the design process to doing a course, to designing the content of the course, and how do things fit together. So for me, it's really important that when people come on a course that I assume they know nothing, which of course some people feel, you know, they come as beginners and other people have a lot more experience, but to always engage at the lowest level in terms of experience and understanding, and to build on that, because it's always good to have a refresher, and people might be getting a new perspective on things, and then that there's a flow through from day to day and through the day, and there's variation in the ways we approach the learning. So different, you know, after lunch there might be more activity, sort of physical activity, so people don't go into that slump. So we're working with the daily rhythm of how our energy is and so on, of course, and I know that varies depending on different people, but trying to very much engage people as much as possible at different levels, creating the diversity, building one on the other, revisiting concepts in new ways. So taking the basic permaculture principles and so on that we begin with, and then start applying them in different ways as we look at soil and trees and water and so on. So yes, and again, sort of the incremental, try it, apply it, see what happens, make small changes. Remember that one. Try new things. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. So sometimes I find myself having to move things around because of certain external circumstances, sectors and all that. And then that either might lead to a happy accident, serendipitous, hey, that really works well, or yeah, I think it was better the way it was. So yeah, I think is that enough to start off with? Just yeah,
that's fine. Oh yeah, that's fine. Thank you. Yeah, and I guess maybe one of the things to draw out is that your big experience is doing 2-week design courses.
Yes,
So,
residentials primarily. Yeah.
And maybe now when we move to Laura, I mean, Laura, you've got a very different kind of proposition, haven't you? Because with Shift Bristol, that's like a year-long kind of process. So that must be a very different sort of flow, how you take students through that kind of side. So maybe, you answer your question how you like, but just to draw out that difference between the 2-week course and a kind of a longer flow. So
yeah, absolutely. If I go back to the beginning of how I got into it, I became a facilitator for a permaculture teacher who had a very distinctive personality, which was quite tenacious and really wanted, and kind of had a real wild heart, activist heart, and wanting to make change in quite an urban setting, with very much knowing that maybe particularly in urban settings, the need for people to learn about group working skills in order to make projects happen. And that those kind of urban communities are different from intentional communities, and the different challenges that they face and that kind of thing. So she put an awful lot of effort, her name was Sarah Pugh, into how she designed her courses in order to support those kind of dynamics. And I was able to work with her kind of as a mentor under my wing, and have that inheritance, like you said, Aranya, from having more experienced teachers, taking all of that observation in and just watching. And sadly, Sarah passed away, and I inherited Shift and the practical sustainability course after we co-founded it around 10 years later. So I came into teaching or facilitating and curating the course not from a teaching background, but having been a facilitator and then stepping into that role. So when I'm thinking about putting the course together, I have 4 C's in mind. So the C's are the container, which is how we kind of health and safety, and the boundaries, and the shape, that inheritance that has been shaped over many, many years, and many of those learning cycles and observation cycles, and all the lessons we've learned from that in order to know what works and what doesn't work. And then our next C is the course culture, which is how we look after people in the space, how we make that a really intentional part of the process, how we use that as a learning opportunity to look at power dynamics and privilege and looking about meeting need and all of that kind of under the carpet stuff that can trip groups up and that kind of thing. And it's really the culture that creates the most transformative educational experience for these people as they are transversing this journey together over the whole year. And then we, of course, have got the teaching content, which is, if you think about permaculture, going from patterns to design, the teaching content starts off in the patterns. And then because we have the luxury of the whole year together, we've got lots of opportunities to kind of deepen that and go into details in those specific areas. And then our last C is the climate, which is kind of how all of those things are working together. Is the group feeling flowing? Is it feeling stuck in its group development cycles, in its absorption of what's being taught to them, their relationships that are building with each other, with the tutors, with the ecosystem of where the course sits within? Kind of, yeah, those big overviews of the climate of how everything's working. So yeah, it's a very different kettle of fish having people for a year. I think you get a lot more space. I think there's more unlearning that needs to happen before people kind of land properly in the space and can almost start again with their learning. It means that we get to go quite deep into why people have come onto the course and what they hope to get out of it. So yeah, there's a lot of, so it means we can play with a lot of different themes rather than kind of staying more in a curriculum content kind of place, which allows us to go into our heart and our head and our hands, which of course also means that you can go in lots of different directions. It means that you have people ebbing and flowing with the course, so it takes a more intentional facilitation holding within that container. And I think what makes it quite unique is that it isn't the teacher that stays with the students throughout the whole year, but it's the facilitation team, and then the tutors visit almost like a patchwork quilt, building these different threads and different patches, and it's actually the facilitators that weave that into a story and make sense for everybody and anchor it. And yeah, we get to decide what other influences might need to come in to help whatever process we're going through at the moment. And I think because therefore we're such a diverse team with all of these different people involved, it means that we're quite responsive and quite agile. We never run the same course twice because, of course, things always change, which Aranya has sort of illuminated as well, that through every learning cycle you go through, you learn something new. You might swap and change certain bits of any of those C's in order to predict what the best course will be the next time that you run it. I think it's really lovely to phrase it as being incremental, because I think it takes the pressure off of course designers and organisers to think that they have to have the most perfect course planned before they can operate into the world, because that's impossible and it doesn't exist anyway. So you just always have to build in that reflective time afterwards, to learn the lessons that have been available and to roll again next time and just keep going with it, really.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, Laura. That's a really fantastic, overview to start us off. Okay, so we've had already a lot of content from Aranya and Laura, and some great kind of patterns and principles there. So let's pass on to Alfred. So, I mean, you've got quite a wide experience, but I think you also bring a kind of unique element to it. So can you tell us a bit more about your own experience of designing permaculture educational programs?
Sure, I'm very happy to. Well, maybe similar to how Laura had a mentor, or the wonderful handouts that Aranya had for his PDC. I also was lucky enough to start with a base, and for me that amazing base was Rosemary Morrow, who I took a teacher training with her as a student, and it was just a transformative experience. I mean, I hesitate to say life-changing because it sounds so cliche, but it really was, and it was life-changing in a number of senses. But with respect to designing educational platforms and materials, courses. I came into the course with the experience of formal education, and I really had no idea about non-formal education. And I can even remember preparing for the teacher training. I watched a PDC. There was a video of a PDC with two of the most well-known permaculture educators on the planet, and I watched it from start to finish. And it was pretty much 72 hours of chalk and talk, or sage on the stage, of just these two teachers talking. And these are brilliant teachers, amazing permaculturalists. But something that I noticed is every now and then the camera would pan towards the audience. It was in a big lecture hall, over 100 students there. And a few times when the camera panned, I could see that people were just almost falling out of their chairs. And it got me thinking, can people really sit and just absorb that much information from one speaker? But then when I went to the teacher training, I think the key takeaway I received from it is the power, the usefulness, the inspiration of designing courses that meet the learning needs of different kinds of people, because many different kinds of people cannot listen to lectures for hours after hours, as the formal education system often has as its base. So that was a real eye opener, is learning about how people learn differently, and that we need to change our teaching methods in order to meet the needs of different learners. And that also all of the academic research and all of the practical experience that we now have in education about how simply listening to a lecture is probably the least effective way for a student to retain information. And then there's a whole spectrum moving towards the students doing something themselves. And finally, the best way to retain information, of course, is to teach that. So I came out of this teacher training with this really profound revelation of a whole different way of looking at education and teaching. And probably my hunger or my enthusiasm for this showed, because then Rosemary asked me to help to edit the first edition of the manual for this teacher training. So I was lucky enough to start collaborating with her towards the very beginning of this teacher training that has evolved over, say, 15 years now. And so at the beginning, there was she had designed the course with the idea of a learning ecosystem, and that over the course of 6 days, each day builds on another, almost like ecological succession, from bare ground to a forest. And so then during this time of collaborating together, being her assistant, and then teaching on my own, I've just been working with this material over and over. And so it's also been incremental and organic. So there was a design in the beginning, and that design that base still serves, but lots and lots of tweaks and developments over the years, especially as Rosemary is always looking at best practices in largely non-formal education, and how to incorporate that into this teacher training. And then there came the opportunity to create an online version of the course on the platform of the association. And so that was an incredible opportunity, and also for me an incredible challenge, because I could see beforehand the obvious relevance now in a pandemic world, and also in an energy descent world where we're not going to be traveling as much as we used to, or many people are not going to be traveling as much, and that's a realistic and good thing. But we want to become even more connected across the planet. So it's obvious that online is an incredible way to engage with each other. So we need to have an online version of the teacher training. But it was for me, the way I see it is something I talk about in my courses is that in permaculture, we put a lot of focus and energy and effort into ecological landscapes, and we're quite good at understanding and designing microclimates in ecological landscapes. But I think we are relatively poor in social landscapes or social microclimates, because we as humans, or especially maybe Western humans, we're not good at living and working and collaborating together, because at least most of us who grew up in Western societies were taught to be individualist. And so we have a lot to learn about how to, again, collaborate together, create projects together that can last, that can sustain itself. We have 1,000 techniques for regenerating landscapes, but I think we lack the same capacity on a social level. And so thinking about that, now with this new online world, we're even less experienced or equipped to work well together online. We don't have the experience yet.
Yeah.
So there's been a whole process that for this teacher training that my co-host, Jen McConaughey, and I both have been studying and learning about how to adapt non-formal education into an online environment. And it's been the learning process. And maybe I'll pass on now, and we can see if there's more questions about how to adapt to online. I see 3 of the students from these online courses here.
Oh,
so
good.
Say hi to you all, and feel free to add comments during the session.
Great. Just to pick up a little bit on what's been said already, I mean, I do find it kind of quite an irony that permaculture was kind of founded by people that were very good at the talk and chalk, or sage on a stage, which I hadn't heard of before. But, there was a lot of lecturing. But actually, my own experience of permaculture teaching has been really creative. When I did mine at Bradford University, there's a lot of different methods used. And then I remember Skye and Robin Clayfield, who did the teaching permaculture creatively side. And certainly in the 90s, you had people like Tony Bazan doing the, Mind Olympics and the accelerated learning and lots of mind maps and thinking tools. And so I think on one hand, there is this tradition, or there is this sort of chalk and talk, but also a very exciting side of permaculture education, which has been very much along the kind of Confucian lines of the quote that I like is, tell me and I will forget, show me and I will remember, and involve me and I will understand. And I think something that I get from all 3 of you is that your educational programs are very much about involving people in a process of education, not just telling them. So I'm going to start off with some questions now to the panel. And I think the one I want to put first is why are we doing this? All 3 of you are putting a lot of work, a lot of your life energy into this educational work. So what do you see as the kind of role of education, or the purpose of education? What is it you're trying to achieve by doing this? So let's go around again, maybe go in the same order. So Aranya, then Laura, then Alfred. So, we could be quite fluid between us, but what do you see as the role of education, or your kind of your purpose in this work?
I think on a very simple level, my purpose is that I have so much excitement about all of this. It's important, it's exciting, I get so much joy from it, and I just want to share it on that level. That's why I became a teacher, I think, because I did my diploma, I finished my diploma, and that was sort of an end point of, I don't have people to engage with anymore around the topic of permaculture. I'll have to recreate that somehow. And particularly because one of my early experiences was going to live in Ireland, as off-grid as you can imagine, because there was no electrical anything. Nearest electricity was 2.5 miles away. We have a wellspring, we grew food, we had no money. We were barefoot, all of this kind of thing. But there was only 3 of us with the occasional visitor. And after a year, I left there. I was sent off on this, decision-making journey to come back to England, go around, and then make a decision to come back again. And at the time, I was thinking, yeah, of course I'm coming back. Why wouldn't I come back to this? It's as close as I've come to paradise. But having then gone and seen all my friends, it was like, oh, but I miss everybody and I want to share this experience with people, and people weren't coming to me. So I felt like I needed to come back and find people to share it with. And I think one of the things that Bill's quoted as saying is to go where you're invited, not go around just trying to convert everybody. But if you saying, you know, I'm here and I love permaculture. And I think my friend Peter Cow also says, you know, change the world by throwing a better party. So it's like, if you're out there and people see that you love your life and that things, obviously there's all this other stuff that can be very depressing, but it's with the circle of concern and everything and the circle of influence, if we do what we can. Permaculture for me has always been about empowering, providing ways of moving forward, doing something positive. And nearly everybody you speak to in permaculture says, yeah, permaculture gave me a way forward, something to do rather than just shout no all the time. So I think for me, the simplest reason why I teach is because for me as a student of permaculture, which is of course is ongoing, it never stops, either learning from other people or from the whole of nature, my garden, there's so much joy and excitement in there. And I just want, it's a bit like saying there's a sunset and I'm the only person enjoying it and I want to share it. You know, it's to share this amazing thing that we're all pulling together. It's not just two Aussie blokes. They kind of started something and set us off, but we're all creating this thing together and it's amazing. And I just want more, as many people as possible who are open to it, to have the opportunity.
Great. Thanks, Aranya. That's really clear. So, Laura, what motivates you? What do you see as your kind of purpose and role as an educator? Or as
I get a bit philosophical. I'm like, what is education, and where does it come from, and why do we need it? And I look at the natural world and I see all the other living beings on the planet, and that teaching does happen in other species, but maybe happens in ours. And I guess it is the passing on of guidance of how to be alive, and not just be alive, but thrive and do that within a niche within the ecosystem. If we're kind of looking at the bare bones of what education is before it got given the label of education. And I guess that used to happen very organically within your group of people within the natural world, because we are nature and nature is us. And over time, repetition through support and guidance from those that were a bit more, you know, a bit older and a bit more developed, or much older if they were elders in the community, this kind of wisdom was passed on. So education is this weird kind of mutually beneficial relationship between different parts of a system, where it's knowledge from the old, like, you know, and if we're talking about the knowledge that comes from the natural world, that's bazillion years old now. And you know, young people, as soon as they're born, no one's been as young as they are, so they have all of these lessons to teach us from their perspective. So it's this constant flow coming in and out. And I think, as much as possible for me, permaculture education is about giving people the opportunity to really take away a lot of the layers and confusion of the world that we're in, and really get back to the basics of what do I need to be alive and to thrive as a living person, as a living creature, and how do I do that with all the other living creatures around me? And in order for that to happen, you need to create these playgrounds where people can be curious and bump into all of these opportunities, and think about what new shapes that they want to take on and new things that they want to try. And in order for people to do that in that vulnerable space of transforming into something new, you need to hold them safely, because when you're changing your, you know, as metamorphosis with any creature, they're in a vulnerable place whilst they're doing that. They're having kind of a rebirth through this, these new influences and things. So our job as educators is to hold people in that vulnerable space, give them lots of lovely inspirations and opportunities to bump into stuff, and not just the nice fluffy stuff, but the really confronting, difficult things that they may need to sort of go through in order to be a more authentic shape to who they are. And then they come out the other end of your process. And I think part of our job as educators is to illuminate next steps and pathways going forward, and linking them up with the people that are going to help them gain confidence in their new shape so they can continue to develop. So this personal transformation part is the absolute kind of the core reason why I'm involved, and it's such a privilege to watch people go through that.
Fantastic, great, thank you, Laura. Alfred, what would you bring in here?
Well, I also came into permaculture after about a decade of ecological activism and saying no, a lot of saying no, a lot of blocking bridges, occupying offices, everything I could lock myself to and say no to, I was doing. But then I had an epiphanal moment one day where I was sitting in a tree way high up in an old growth Western red cedar tree in a forest on the west coast of Canada. And in this day, I was watching the forest being clear cut in front of me, and behind me was still the remaining old growth forest. But I had the realization that even though I felt completely justified in risking my life to defend this forest, but I didn't know anything about it, really. I didn't know how it worked. I didn't know the species. And so I was still replicating the pattern of human apart from nature. I was not nature defending itself. And so when I got out of jail after that action, I was sitting in a cafe and I saw a poster for a permaculture design course where I could learn to observe and interact with nature. And I realized that that's what I needed to do. And so through permaculture, I really also felt like I could finally start to learn a lifelong learning process about how to create the world that we want to live in, as opposed to just saying no to the destruction that we're against. And then as far as education goes, I think about a quote from the German artist Bertolt Brecht, who said that art is not a hammer held up to reality, but a hammer with which to shape it. And okay, dramatic example, but with education, I think it's clear that good education can really help us shape the world that we want to live in. And so that's what gives me inspiration. And like Aranya's inspiration for permaculture and for the excitement to being able to share this incredible sacred knowledge. I came after doing permaculture for a long time. I felt like I want to contribute to a multiplier effect by teaching it. So doing it, but as well as teaching it, because it's just so exciting. And to me, it really is in line with the values I have in activism. I mean, really, the ethics of permaculture, earth care, people care, and fair share are those are the elements of the activism that I really believe in. And so for permaculture education, for me, is a way to really help to put them into practice.
Right. Practice is a great place to stop, because that's where I want to now take the next question for the four of you, and maybe we can spotlight all four of us, and we can kind of have more of a discussion around this, because I think this is quite an interesting question. So one of the challenges I think that you get on a course is that some people don't want to be too emotional. Some people want everything to be practical and do kind of like, why aren't we just spending all the time like learning how to do more with seedlings? And some people are like very intellectual and they want statistics and facts and figures. So what would you say are some of the ingredients for designing an educational offering that engages heart and hands and head? How do you balance those and bring those into your curricula and into your educational programs? So maybe just let's see who jumps in first.
Well, I could jump in. Okay, jumping in. I think that as far as the heart goes, a really crucial part is at the beginning of the course, building a learning community. Taking the time and through different techniques, creating links between the different people, creating not a safe space. I used to talk about creating safe spaces, but then someone gave me an interesting perspective on that. We should be creating brave spaces, because actually we can't really create safe spaces. There is no such thing as a safe space, but we can create spaces where people are empowered and enabled and encouraged to be brave and to go, you know, that little bit outside of their comfort zone into a danger zone where the learning really occurs. So I think in terms of heart, if we at the beginning of a course we do enough exercises and dynamics and so on that will create that community, then that's what develops the heart connection.
Great. Does anybody want to jump in with heart or head or hands?
I can jump in. I think it's really important to know the story of your course when you're advertising it, and be really, really clear about exactly what happens on the course to align those expectations with people that are drawn towards it. When I first took over, I didn't know the story as well as I do now, and there were definitely times when students came and their expectations didn't align. And through that, we kind of have a much more evolved, because it is a year-long course and it is a, you know, it's a large financial and time investment for people. We have one-to-one interviews with them and kind of really go into the depths of what it will be like. So that's probably like a good bit of safeguarding, first of all. And then, as Alfred said, kind of really that incremental building up that container for people to be experimental and be brave and test out their comfort zones. And just thinking, just running through like your own minds as a facilitation or teaching team, kind of different situations that might come up if you know that you're going to do something that is going to, that's hopefully going to have lots of impact on the students, but people might need space to react to that in different ways. How might you build in kind of those zones of participation, even if it's sort of saying to students, if you're doing a go round where you're sharing quite heartfelt stuff like people can pass, people that have been through formal education or haven't much experience of being in intentional circles in that way, they won't have that, they won't feel like they can say no. They might not feel like they have a lot of agency. So you just have to be really clear about what choices people have. Even like people's ability to check in with their own bodies, to know whether they are wobbled by what's happening. So building up those kind of skills, first of all, of self-awareness in their body, in their heart and their mind, before you dive into more difficult stuff. Yeah.
Thank you, Laura. Aranya, do you want to come in on this? I mean, I'm always think of you and such a lot of information that you bring. So, I mean, you say what you want to say, but I'd be really interested as well as like from the sort of head perspective, how you bring in kind of some of the information that you have.
Yes, I mean, certainly just, I can come to that in a second. So reflecting on what's been said already about creating the container, which is a nice word, isn't it? It's the idea of containing and holding, and coming back to that sort of the triangle, the pyramid of needs, what is it called? The Maslow's hierarchy is a good word, isn't it? Used in different ways, the hierarchy of needs. And so when people arrive, if they're doing a 2-week course particularly, which is the most intensive, I think, because it's people are coming from places, very often they don't know the people around them, although I did once have 2 couples turned up on a course from the same village who knew each other, who didn't know they were coming on the course. They were really disruptive. So probably better that people don't know each other, but just to how do we get people up the pyramid to the growth part at the top, this idea of we're here to learn, and people arrive, they're a bit unsure about, who are all these people? Am I going to be fed? Will it be comfortable? Will I sleep all right? Is it a safe place to be? Who are these people? And just so trying to bring people as quickly and gently as possible through that process. So just using a ball for the name round. So just throw a ball and say somebody's name, but make it very playful and say it's not a catching competition. And then laughter comes out of that, because inevitably somebody will drop the ball and I start putting in a couple more balls and there's balls flying everywhere and people saying names, and then at some point you get to Thursday and we're talking about composting toilets and pooing and all of that kind of thing, and people, when you get to that level and people start to feel safe to talk about those things, it's really interesting how you drop down into a level of more comfort as a group, and the group bonds around things that we generally are not supposed to talk about. So I think for me, it's getting people into that place where they feel safe, they connect with other people. We're all here for a similar reason. We might be from different environments, but we're all here to do the same thing essentially, and we have something in common. And then suddenly, because they're now surrounded by people that have something in common with, which is not perhaps normal in their everyday life,
Yep.
then it feels a sense there's a tribe almost starting to form out of that. And for me, that's really lovely, just to see those moments where that shift happens. And there's so teaching, I mean, this is for me, because permaculture, everything is connected, so it's very easy. We have this concept of the mango that I'm sure is around the culture, which is something that's off topic and anyone can call a mango, and we introduce that at the beginning of the course, that if you think we've gone off topic, say, is this a mango? And so yes, for me, it's because everything is connected, it's very interesting the way the learning journey goes, because you always have a unique collection of people, obviously, and they all have specific needs, and so the journey always takes a different route, and there'll be more focus on certain things, but that conversation is ongoing as to, you know, what do people want to know about, and to keep it open, so it's not just this is what I'm going to teach you and hard luck, that's what you're getting, but that there's an ongoing conversation around, you know, and when you're having meals and so on together, then those topics come up and it becomes part of, there's a two-way information flow.
Yeah.
And so for us as a teaching team, learning about the needs of the group in order to then have those conversations. So yeah, and keep it fun.
Thanks, Aranya. That reminds me actually of a word that I bring into my courses. Is it's a Welsh word. I'm probably saying it wrong, but dysgu, D-Y-S-G-U. I think it is dysgu. I think it means teaching and learning, and it's the idea we can all contribute something. So everyone that comes on the course is also sharing their experience and their learning, and you know, we bring what we know, but we don't know everything. And I think that learning community is something that really is quite transformational. And I think it brings me on to another question I wanted to ask, which is about kind of recognizing our own kind of limitations and boundaries. Because, you know, on permaculture course, we're trying to we're looking at the Earth Care, People Care, Fair Shares future. Well, that's pretty big. Then we're talking about nature and ecology. Well, that's vast. And then we're talking about like design, and then how that applies within the built environment, the nature, farming, education, social systems, economy. It's like no one can know all of that. So how do you design either your educational program, or how do you approach not being able to know everything about the topic? How do you signpost? How do you kind of deal with that? With the limitations that we have as educators. So there's a question back to all three of you. Maybe let's start with Alfred, and then it takes the guessing out.
Sure. So I can remember the first permaculture course that I taught, and I was asked a question. I mean, still, Rosemary was helping me, kind of like helping an addict get out of an addiction. I was still addicted to the idea of formal education, where the teacher has to know everything. And basically, you know, you as a teacher, you're pouring your knowledge into the empty glass of the student. So she was helping me break my addiction to that unhealthy way of living. And I was asked a question, and immediately I realized I really wasn't quite sure, but I have to give the right answer. So I said something, and fortunately, several of the students said, no, I don't think so. And what it helped me perceive is that, yeah, we don't need to know everything. And actually, it's a relief. What a relief to be able to say, that's a good question, and I'm not sure the right answer. And what do you all think? Or I'm going to research that more to make sure that I can really give you a solid answer. And so for me, the idea that we are all teachers and learners is such a fundamental and empowering part of non-formal education. And in order to put that into practice, you as the teacher need to come in knowing, I don't know everything. and that's okay. And it's actually a relief. And when I ask something that I don't know, I'm going to be honest about that, because I think in a way that's what creates a link between, one of the ways to create a link between you and your students, and also to create a learning community that's built on confidence and trust and respect.
Great, thanks, Alfred. So maybe bring Laura in. And Laura, I mean, I guess one of the things that's interesting about Shift is that you have so many different teachers.
Yeah, I'd be absolutely stuffed if I was required to do like 5% of what we teach on the course. I've never actually been through it, so I I've got no idea actually the experience that these students have. In all honesty, because I'm behind the scenes doing all the other stuff. But so trust in the people that you bring into the space to teach their things. So we have quite an interesting kind of recruitment process for when we involve new tutors, and we're looking at their own heart, head and hands in terms of their own practice. Are they on the ground doing the stuff that they are talking about? Are they concerned about the wider issues? Are they still passionate about the work that they're doing? We've had tutors that have worked with us for a long period of time, but they've gone so far through their teaching journey that they're not actually that excited about teaching anymore. So even though they're actually like the most experienced and ripe in terms of their knowledge, because they're no longer wanting to engage with people in that way with it, it's time to bring in somebody who maybe knows less, but they're really on the point of wanting to share. It sounds like, Aranya, like with your joy still so present, that's like a really amazing gift for you. Yeah, so that's kind of where we're looking at it. And do that, is the quality of the content really good and valuable for the students? But yeah, it just takes a massive patchwork of people to run the practical sustainability course in terms of content. It means not just bringing people in to teach that are teachers. It means bringing people into the room that live in the deep world and don't teach, but we feel like they've got valuable skills, and then a facilitation team kind of bridge where they might lack in their delivery into the students. We can help them bring their content into the room. So it's really valuing different sorts of teaching, but yeah, it takes a lot of trust, and therefore things go wrong. Sometimes you don't bring the right people into the room, and that's fine. It's fine if you're accountable to when things go wrong and you have a process of discussing that with the students and unpacking it, and that also requires you to get really comfortable with your own vulnerabilities and being imperfect as course providers and not needing to know everything and get everything right, and that's all part of the learning as well, is like teaching people how to overcome stuff when it doesn't go entirely to plan, to allow space for people to be disappointed, to have that honest conversation with you. So one of the biggest things we teach on the course is ability to give and receive feedback, and to practice doing that to the point where it doesn't feel triggering. People are more comfortable with the discomfort, because the faster you can speed that up, the quicker you are to overcome things and get more efficient and more enjoyable. What else? I think that's all for now, but if anything else comes, I might hop back in.
No, that's great. Thank you. Thanks. Aranya, anything you want to add around?
I've almost forgotten the question, but what's in mind at the moment is, yes, this role of apprenticeship, that I love having people on courses as an apprentice teacher, and that role can be as simple as just being in the observation phase, because they've done a PDC. I did a PDC at one point, and then I had the opportunity to sit in as part of the team delivering the course, but without necessarily any pressure to teach it. But there's an invitation there, and there's opportunities maybe to lead a morning circle or two, or to run some edge events, games or other activities and so on, or to tag team a session, or just do a little part of a session, so to try and create an environment where that's encouraged, but there's no sort of pressure. And sometimes there'll be 2 or 3 people in that role on a course, not very often, but sometimes, and some will be much more confident about that than others, but then they might work together. So and for me, that's really exciting. And also just this idea of letting go of outcomes and thinking, oh, but I could do it better. Well, I think I could do it better. Maybe I don't do it better. And that whatever happens in the room is something that we all learn from, and if there's something I feel that's missing, well, I can pick that up later anyway and just put that in a different session. So to go, for me, it's what nature does, of course, is there's a flow and the flow just goes where the flow goes. And I guess it's a little bit of a metaphor like Swindale Beck, which is a river that was straightened about 200 years ago up in the lakes, I think. And the trout disappeared. They stopped spawning there. And then very recently, they spent a huge amount of money digging the original course from drawings and so on with diggers and everything. And the trout came back. Of course, we know that we could have done it cheaper, just letting water do the work. But the fact that the flow goes where the flow wants to go, and whoever is there, it's, what is that thing again? Whoever turns up are the right people, and whatever happens is the right thing. And to not have a sense of it always has to be like this. And for me, there's a joy in that, because again, we always learn.
Yeah.
And there's always I always enjoy the dynamic with people who apprentice with me, as I did as an apprentice teacher. And some of them have gone on to be, I've lost them because they've gone off to do their own thing.
Great.
Which is great, but it's like, oh well.
Picking up on your the theme of flowing, I mean, that wasn't what the answer the question was, but we got somewhere very interesting anyway. So thanks. You brought in an element about apprenticeship, which I hadn't actually kind of anticipated asking. So yeah, I guess in terms of like flowing on, and we've got about half an hour left, and one of the questions I think we really kind of must address before we finish is around, like, how do we know if it's working? You know, I think, Aranya, you've sort of touched upon this in terms of like whatever needs to happen happens, and that's what's in the room, and so on. And you know, I think it's a very hard thing to really do with education and with sort of learning. I know this from the Leeds Permaculture course. You know, you put a lot of time, a lot of effort into running a course, and then, you know, I'm really kind of curious, did it make any difference? And occasionally you get this great feedback. I mean, I remember someone coming along and sort of gushing all this sort of stuff about all these amazing things that they were doing. They'd set up some great big small holding project in France, and about 5 minutes in I said, stop a minute, who are you? Like, I did your intro course about 10 years ago and I've gone off and done this. And I was like, wow, amazing. But so often we don't really kind of hear the story and find out where it went. So like, for each of you, how do you kind of measure how effective your offering is? How do you know if you've been successful, or how do you even quantify or qualify your success?
Well, I suppose for me, engagement, and just it's interesting, particularly when you start teaching, because there's so much focus on, have I remembered everything, and I'm looking at my notes and what am I doing? But once you start to get more in the flow of it, you're much more aware of the group's dynamic and what's happening. And I remember one particular example many years ago with one of my apprentice teachers who sang a little song about the ethics right at the beginning of the course, and I could just sense this energy thing going on in the room. I was at the back corner, something was going on over there, and this guy just stood up after a moment and said, I didn't come here for this hippie shit, and he stormed out. But of course, for the apprentice, it was quite a defining moment of just that, okay, that happened, and we didn't really expect that, and that was fine. And I went to talk to him, and we worked out from this conversation that there would be a hippie shit warning before anything that might come up, so that he would just read a book instead or something if we thought. And actually the course went absolutely fine, and he was lovely, but it was, yeah, just a very interesting moment. Yes, so I'm not quite sure. I had other things I was going to say, but that.
So that's good though. So that's like ongoing evaluation. You're kind of assessing as you go. Like, is this working right now? Are people engaged?
Yeah. So
the outcome is that people are engaged and participating in the session right in that in the here and now.
Yes.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's difficult to engage directly with people. I just remember one example of a guy who was Australian. Well, he had an Australian accent, and he used to come in late every morning, and he always looked really tired. And I thought he was, maybe taking drugs or something up late or doing whatever. But he approached me at the end of the course. We sat down. He approached me at the fire. We were sitting around a fire. And he said, "This has just been the most incredible experience of my life. I've been up late every night looking stuff up on the internet and working out what I'm going to do in my life." And I was just, wow, I had no idea that was going on. And that's fantastic. And so sometimes we don't know what's happening for people because they don't tell us. And that's also fine. Maybe, as you say, Andy, people find us later on and they say, "Hey, yeah, I've done all this stuff." And you think, wow. And maybe we don't need to know. We just need to do what we do.
Yeah. Okay, great. Good perspective. Yeah. Or Alfred, do you look like you're ready to come in?
Well, just that in non-formal education, it is a challenge to get quantifiable results after a course, because unlike law school, unlike a formal educational program, we're not going to send a survey of, did you get a job with a prestigious law firm? What is your average salary of our graduates? So we need to have qualitative feedback, and it's exactly what what Aranya and Andy are talking about, is just having the experience of the world's a small place, and so we get these feedback every now and then of people, what have they done after our courses, after our PDCs, our teacher training, specialty courses. And if you get that feedback that people have gone on to do empowering, innovative work, then that's enough. It's enough for me to continue. But I think it's an interesting question, and I wonder if, and maybe some of the participants have an idea of how could we actually get more feedback that's more more rigorous about our permaculture education and the impacts. Of course, we do end of course evaluations, but what else could we do to really find out what the impact our education is having and what could be done better?
Yeah, great. Well, if anyone listening and has any kind of evaluation work they do or any ideas, then put that into the chat. And I think there's some questions in the chat which we're going to come to in a moment. So,
can I give my 2 pennies worth, Andy? Have we got time for that?
Very much.
I think either comes down to you just observe what's happening around you. If you aren't actively seeking feedback, then you're just taking notice of where people end up. I think because the PSC involves so much of the neighbouring ecosystem around us, we are really aware of where people end up in terms of the projects they get involved with and who they work with. And we begin to knit into that before they leave the course. In terms of like online platforms where we try and group students together to keep in touch with each other, we use the Evil Facebook, and we have a Telegram group, but we're also setting up a space on Vive, which is the Transition Network's new platform, where we can hopefully group together people that have done the course. And we do networking events alongside our teaching. So we had one last year, which was called Proper Job, where we grouped, we had 150 people come together to talk about regenerative livelihoods and try to illuminate the pathways that people move between and work out what the limiting factors are that stop them from doing that. And then we've started, alongside the Bristol Commons movement, which is growing, something called Educators Unite, where we're trying to get people to come together for all different types of education, all those that work in the mainstream and permaculturalists and all sorts of people, really looking at the role of education and how we can do things differently. And that will obviously, a load of really important stuff will emerge from that. So it's that kind of capture and storage and finding somewhere useful, public, creating a knowledge commons where people can gain access to, with communication channels and signposting so that people can start to connect. So that's a bit of work that Shift is doing alongside our teaching, which we hope will help.
Great. I realise I've just looked at the chat and realised that maybe my sound isn't so good. So let me know if I need to make it louder or quieter or anything like that. I'm slightly on the move at the moment. I'm not at a familiar place. So is my sound okay? Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. Let's take one of the questions from the chat and from the group that's joining. So the question is, how do you work to have a financially just program that pays educators and workers and attracts a cohort? So yeah, a question about, I guess, how do we make it work financially? Aranya.
Well, it's proving quite difficult at the moment. So I'm just in this place of trusting. For me personally, when I did my PDC, there were only 4 of us on the course, and Stephen Nutt taught the course, despite there was only 4. I mean, he probably made no money at all. So, and it's kind of interesting to try and honour that for for 20 years. But there is that sense of, I don't know what people are going to go on and do. And so sometimes, and it is difficult because we have people who, my friend Charlotte, who caters a lot for our courses. And so there's often this conversation about, well, there's not very much money in the pot. And so we are making a decision on that basis. But then what else will I do for 2 weeks? I'll be at home, probably pootling about in the garden, avoiding writing my book or something. So then I feel like it has to be more, for me, it's more than just the financial yield, although I understand that money does pay for stuff. And at the moment it's in a bit of a, but other times, sometimes we have more people. Our course in November seems to be popular, I think, probably because a lot of people who come on the course like to garden, and there's not too much to do in November. You can kind of leave your garden and feel that it's going to be safe. You might have some leaves blow away, but there's not much else that can go wrong in November. And so I think a lot of people come, and so that course tends to attract more people and is more financially viable. I think it's difficult because we don't want to be competing with each other and undercutting, which I seem to remember many years ago could be a problem. And then we would ride the wave of, there'll be a year where every course filled, and so, well, we could run more courses next year, or other people would say, hey, all these courses filled, maybe we should run a course. And then next year there's way more courses and people are more spread out, and then the money didn't work so well. So then there's just this ongoing systemic pattern of ebb and flow around that. So I don't think there's any easy answers after 20 years. I don't think I can say there's any easy answers other than just offer something that people need. How do we meet people's needs in a way that is affordable, that we make it possible for people to afford it, even if they don't necessarily have as much money as other people? And what is it that we can offer? And sometimes that changes, and I'm feeling also, for me, maybe I'm heading in a direction where I'm developing new programs around the stuff I'm writing about and doing something different. So
Thanks, Aranya. It is a real challenge, isn't it? I know as a permaculture educator myself, running a Leeds permaculture design course, it's tough. And I think everything is different after the pandemic. I think that's been a really big, and cost of living crisis. It's the number of people wanting the bursary options is huge, and not so many people wanting to pay. So still great interest, but how to make it work financially is an important question. Is there anything you'd like to add, Laura? I mean, you've got a really big program that you offer, and I know you said you interview people, and it's a great offering that you have. And I mean, I don't know if people quite appreciate, how much work goes into these things to make them work, and the value that they get for what they pay. But how do you manage this balance?
Yeah, I think one of the benefits of the PSC is that you have one intake in September, and then if you can fill all your bums on seats, then you don't have to worry about it for a year. And then that pays for my job for the year, and it pays for the facilitator's job and the budget for all the tutors. And if we have a full cohort of 30 students, and that's 100 grand, which pays for the course for the year. But in terms of the value for the students, it's over 650 in-person teaching hours, and diversity and all of that. All of the value that they get out of the course, pay for all their accommodation and all the equipment and stuff on the course. So compared to other courses, it's good value. Like the highest tier people pay is 3,600, and the lowest tier is under three grand, sort of 600 increments. So having a tiered system, allowing people to pay in installments, spreading it out. You know, we can be, because it's a large group, it allows for you to be really flexible. If people get in a bit of a pickle with their money, you know, we can increase the amount of the breakdown of it. What else do we do financially for people? Yeah, I think we're just really lucky in the sense we're quite a niche type of course offering in the ecosystem, so we don't have a lot of competition alongside it. And I think a good test to showing our impact is that a lot of the people that sign up because they know somebody that's done the course.
Yeah.
So word of mouth is a real something that really works in our favor for marketing, but we have to put an awful lot of effort into marketing still in all sorts of different ways, online, flyers. And one of the most effective ways is going out and giving talks about what permaculture is in the local community. So if there's any opportunity to join in somebody's sustainability week or something, get yourself out there, learn the inspiring story of permaculture, how your course might meet needs. Think about, you know, if you're thinking about marketing, think about different reasons why people might want to come to the course. And it might be about learning the content, but it might be about just wanting to find like-minded individuals, different age groups, different life stages. They need different things from the course. So the more you can get into other people's shoes about what they might need from it and tell that story and attract them to it, the better. And then, yeah, linking up with people that have got more experiencing about bringing funding in for marginalized groups that don't have any access to these sorts of courses, and providing gateways in for them as well is always obviously a great thing to do.
Yeah. Thanks, Laura. Yeah. And yeah, that's a relatively recent thing that we've been doing in Leeds as well, is really trying to look about who can't afford it, who would we really love to be there, and how can we make that happen. And I think that's a growing area for all of us to consider. Alfred, is there anything you'd like to bring in here around financial aspects?
Yeah. I don't want to repeat what already has been said, but just to emphasize, it is definitely not easy as well. And I've seen, say, over the last decade, well, the age of abundance, Macron said last year, the age of abundance is over. And that's a controversial statement. But there's now the cost of living crisis, the rents are up, the crunch is on, and it's obviously time to get more flexible. So something that I'm thinking about right now is, so I have a course coming up later this year, and I always try and offer a sliding scale, and explain that, you know, people can express their solidarity with others who are in less fortunate economic circumstances by paying more to allow others who can only afford to pay less to join the course. But also we have some just straight up scholarships as well. And one thing that I'll be working on later today is actually trying to coordinate a crowdfunding campaign for some participants. There's a wonderful association from Lebanon, and a group of them would like to come. But of course, Lebanon has the highest inflation rate now in the world after Venezuela. And so it's a real challenge for them to pay for the course. So one technique that we can do to express our solidarity with them as teachers is help to organize a crowdfunding campaign. But of course, it is stacking functions in the sense that then if that's successful, then there would be funding for more students to come to our course as well. So I think we can look at it both as stacking functions, helping to look for sources for funding for lower income participants. But you know, the reality of the situation is also just that to the degree that we can teach inspiring courses and create that word of mouth that was mentioned before, I think it's perhaps one of the best things that we can do of all in order to fill future courses.
Do what, sorry?
Oh, so the word of mouth. So if people come away from our courses satisfied, fulfilled, excited, inspired, they will do the marketing for us to a degree. So really, we can focus on making our courses as high quality as possible, in part as well as a strategy for future marketing for how do we fill our courses.
Great. Okay, thank you. So I think we've probably got time for one more question before we wrap up. And I mean, I think one of the big changes, obviously, over the last few years has been the level of online work that's happened. And I know from the Permaculture Association perspective, we'd been planning for some time to start developing some online learning, and we're taking our time and trying to involve people. And then just as we're about to launch the pandemic hit, and all of a sudden everyone was online and it all completely changed. And we've gone from a position of people were a bit like, oh, Jeff Lawton's doing an online course, but that's just Jeff. So pretty much everyone I know is doing something online or an online element. And even to the extent where one of the people on the course just finished in Leeds a couple of months ago, had kind of chronic fatigue, and actually making it so that she could just be from home and dial in for half the day, and she'd come in for half the day, meant that she could do the course. And that was absolutely fantastic. It's someone who would not have been able to participate, but that now could, with a very simple adaptation. So just broadly, how do you see the sort of new possibilities of online, either exclusively online or partly online? How's that coming into the work that you're doing?
Okay. Many years ago, I got involved with George Sobel when he was doing a blended learning thing, and I remember coming out of that at the end thinking that it sort of had the worst of both options, because you had to turn up. You had a couple of meetings, the one at the beginning, one at the end, and mostly people didn't turn up at the end because they hadn't done the online bit in the middle. And so, but that was many years ago. I would love to, yes, to learn more about how to do this well, because for me, I just love being in the room with people, and this is kind of halfway there, but it's still for me a bit distanced. And people always have distractions. I feel when I'm in a room with a group of people together and we're all learning, we're focused on what we're doing. It's intensive. And also there's a community that comes from that just doesn't come from anything else for me. And so I find the online bit difficult. And what I've ended up doing with my course was, just because we were designing our new place here, I just filmed everything and said, this is what we've been doing, and if you want to join in, and this is what we've done, off you go and do yours. And then there's sort of meetings every month of just catching up with people, but I feel that it still lacks for me something. And again, screens, I'm not a great fan of standing in front of a screen, particularly when I'm writing my book, which I have to do on the computer anyway. So I'm kind of, I find that sticky. I find that difficult, and I would love to know how to do that better. And maybe that involves me having to find somebody to collaborate with to make that work better. I don't know. So,
well, an especially big thanks then for standing in front of this screen for an hour and a half. Yeah. Alfred, I mean, you've put your creative teaching, or the teacher training onto the Permaculture Community Hub. So yeah, say a bit more about your online experience.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I certainly agree with a lot of what Aranya just said, and have that same sense of, being online is just not the same as being in person. And actually, before I did my first doing my first online course, which wasn't a teacher training, it was just that right before the pandemic, an art gallery in Germany had gotten a grant, and they wanted to do, I was going to come there to do a permaculture course. The pandemic arrived, and it was going to be canceled. But fortunately, the gallery director kept saying, let's do it online, let's do it online. And I kept saying, no, it's not worth it. And she just said, okay, well, we'll give the money back. It's like, okay, let's try it. And, fortunately, fortunately, it turned out to be, in that case, it was a worthwhile experience for me. And then I've now had these ongoing processes where, for me, the lack of affinity and realness of being together in a group can be compensated by being together at the same time with people from Uganda and South Africa and Norway and the UK. And also, again, thinking about a low carbon future and an energy descent future. I'm interested in following to see how far we can go with online learning or blended learning. And fortunately for the teacher training, that was adapted online. My co-host Jen McConaughey had experience, and so already had a base of some knowledge and skills, but then also Gemma from the association helped direct me to good resources. And now I also really appreciate the work being done by the association. For example, there was a talk done in April, Overcoming Barriers in Permaculture, with a focus on neurodiversity. So there are people that are putting together a body of knowledge of how we can meet the learning needs of people. And I have to say, a lot of it are things that I just wouldn't have thought about. For example, the amount of time staring at a screen, how many breaks are necessary. There's just an increasing body of knowledge of how to meet the needs of different learners online. And I think that's exciting. And I want to stay up to date, incorporate best practices, because I think it's here to stay, and it has a lot of advantages, while recognizing that it's still not the real world. But in a way, it reflects the fact that now so much of my life compared to before is a blended world anyway. I have my real life here, but a lot of what I do is mediated through technology. So in a way, I think bringing that to education is kind of a realistic thing to do at this point.
Great, thanks, Alfred. And Laura, do you bring me up?
Yeah, I think the problem with screens and connecting this way is that our body, apart from our eyes and our ears, is completely just not involved in the whole process. So it's almost like there's a whole part of you that just needs to catch up, or doesn't even believe what you've just sat through is real. It's not been embodied in any way. But it wasn't one of our courses, but I took part in a course around mental health resilience and that kind of thing. And he did a lot of things where we all had a similar body reaction at the same time. So we did a whole process of eating a chili, and then it was kind of like leaning into the discomfort of eating a chili, but knowing that your body is having the same experience of all of these other bodies kind of help to overcome that difficulty. So I think any activities that involve the body whilst you're with the screen, and like Alfred said, don't overestimate how much time people can spend in front of a screen. Like, it's much lower than it is in person, obviously. But yeah, involving the senses in different ways. And I think there's a difference between when a group of people that live maybe in the same city kind of get together online, it can feel a bit sad. It's kind of like, well, why aren't we able to be together? Unless there are obviously real accessibility issues for those people. But I'm also working with an amazing man in the Kakuma refugee camp in Kenya. And the first time that I had contact with him through WhatsApp and just a video call, it felt absolutely magical. I was like, it's the first time, because I'm not, I'm just in Bristol, I'm a single mum and all of that kind of stuff. And I've not done teacher training and had opportunities to travel around and see other courses. So for me, like, having that direct contact with this human being on the other side of the world just blew my mind. And I'm running, like, because he has nothing, his project has nothing, and he's finding it, no money or anything, and because I just find it so magical and lovely, like, I'm just wanting to help him run his sessions about permaculture with the children that he's working with. But they speak many different languages, technologies. If you think we have trouble with Zoom, trying to connect with their technology. But it's just like this, the desire there to connect is amazing. And it's taught me that kind of, although he wants knowledge from me, on the other side of the screen, I'm not the right person to give it to the children. So it's kind of me passing the knowledge on to them as teachers to become the facilitators for the children. When would they like to talk to me through the screen? When is it best that they're together as a group and not paying attention? So it's making us think really creatively around how to have my face in that space through a screen. Just interesting.
Great. Well, the irony there is, of course, that we should probably have a shorter sessions, but at the same time, this 90 minutes has flown past and we've had an absolutely fantastic conversation. I know we need 5 minutes at the end, so I'm just wondering whether I can do like a very, very quick, like, last thought from each of you, like designing masterclass, like a line from each of you. So I'm going to start off just to set the tone. So I'm going to say that the thing I found really helpful was this idea of brave spaces. That's not something I'd heard before. So the idea of moving from safe spaces to brave spaces. So thank you, Alfred. Alfred, what have you taken from this? And just a line or two.
What I've taken from this talk is, well, one thing that I appreciated so much was hearing from Aranya and Laura of their experiences, and how I just can imagine in the future this continuity of permaculture educators, that we're going to be building this base of knowledge. You know, again, this image of Aranya having some handouts from a PDC, and then, you know, building that, and then what became design visions and so on, and what Laura has developed, you know, at Shift. Just that we can take this and pass it down, pass it on into the future, and that gives me hope. It gives me a lot of hope in an otherwise very, very hard moment for the world.
Thank you, Alfred. Laura, anything you're taking away or appreciated?
Yeah, I would just appreciate being in a space where people share their ideas and their experience. I think that's the key to education in lots of ways. I'm interested in, if we're at this crux of financial difficulty, but we're also wanting to embrace abundance, how can we organize ourselves as like an educational network to support each other to be more abundant and be more brave and have more offerings? Yeah,
that's a great thought. Thank you. And Aranya?
Yeah, definitely echo that. How do we do this better as a group and coming together like this? And I would love to also see more in the chat from the everybody who's been here that hasn't spoken, but that it is a work in progress, and it's great to hear from you, the two of you as well. Well, Andy as well. I've known Andy for a long time, around your experiences, and that it's okay that it's a work in progress, and that we'll just continue moving forward. And it's a journey. There's no end point. It's just a journey. Like Stuart Brand says, you don't finish a building, you start a building, and then until it's broken and it falls down, nobody finishes the building. It just evolves and changes. And if we can dance with people's needs and find our place within that, within our community of learning,
great.
then I think that's wonderful.
Thanks, Aranya. Okay, thanks for everyone participating. I'm going to pass back now to Gemma. Gemma's got a few words for us before we come to a close.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say a huge thank you to our amazing panel and to Andy for hosting and holding that conversation. It was really fascinating, and I'm so glad it's been recorded so that many more people than just those that are here today can watch it. So thank you. And thank you to you all for joining. It was a lot of time to sit here today. So thank you for coming along and for the questions that are added and just paying attention to this brilliant conversation. About the community, like we have an educators membership of which our panel are all part of, including Andy. That educator membership, I'll drop a link in the chat in a second if it's not already been done. It's a real opportunity to get the teaching resources, to get support to join the Certified Teachers Register, to talk to each other on the Community Hub Educator space, and build courses on our online learning platform if you want to. So do email me about that if you want to learn more about the membership. Our next masterclass is on the 24th of July, and it's all about celebrating your impact. That one will be with James Atherton of Lush, who works with several philanthropy and prize programs. Samuel from Salthaven, he's the co-founder of Salthaven, and Anne-Marie Mayer, who's in the Permaculture Impact Project and I believe on our board. There's so many of you doing amazing things, life-changing work in permaculture. Our teachers, project leaders, community groups, charities, you're all at the forefront of delivery. So that masterclass is all about how we can celebrate the impact that you're having, and give you the recognition that you deserve, support more funding applications for this great work, and share your stories in mainstream media to increase that impact. So please do come along to that session if you're interested in that topic. Another date for your diary is next year's big permaculture event, an unconference or a festival, however we're going to talk about that, but it's around about the 13th to the 15th of June 2025. So please put that date in your diary. And finally, we will be running an education event in November. So for all of our educator members, but also for everyone who is working in education. The date has not yet been finalised, but please do pay attention to what's happening in November and come along. But thank you so much for coming today. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Enjoy the sun.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Aranya. Thanks, Laura. Thanks all for coming.